Commander Vextar's 4 massive arms creaked as he lowered himself into the battered metal chair. The seat groaned under his weight, a sound that echoed through the smoky depths of the Nexus Station cantina. This place had seen better days, much like himself. Scorch marks decorated the walls, and the air tasted of recycled oxygen mixed with a dozen different alien atmospheres. The cantina buzzed with the usual crowd. Traders haggling over cargo manifests, bounty hunters nursing their drinks in dark corners, and maintenance crews coming off their shifts. But tonight, something different filled the air. Word had spread that the legendary Commander Vextar was here, and young soldiers couldn't resist the pull of war stories from a living legend. 3 recruits had gathered the courage to approach his table. A young Cathari female sat closest to him, her blue scales catching the dim neon lights that flickered overhead. Her name was Zixra, barely past her first molting, with eyes wide as moons. Next to her, a nervous Blixian male named Korth kept fidgeting with his multiple tentacles, wrapping and unwrapping them around his chair legs. The third was a massive young Gornok called Dex, his rocky hide still showing the pale patches of recent growth spurts. "Commander Vextar," Zixra chirped, her voice high with excitement. "Please, tell us about the human war. Everyone says you were there when it all went down." Vextar studied them with his one good eye, while his cybernetic replacement whirred, softly adjusting its focus. Hoffa's face was a patchwork of scars and metal, tubes and wires disappearing into ports behind his ear. The young ones stared at his wounds with fascination rather than horror. They had no idea what those scars really meant. "War stories," he muttered, reaching for his drink. The fermented keth root burned going down, but it helped dull the memories. That never seemed to fade. Kids think war is glory and honor, medals and parades when you come home. Korth leaned forward eagerly. "But you won, didn't you? The Coalition crushed the human rebellion in just 6 months. Everyone knows the story." A harsh laugh escaped Vextar's throat. "One, kid. If that's what they're teaching in the academies these days, then Command has learned nothing." He set his glass down harder than necessary, the sound sharp and the noisy. "Cantina, let me tell you something about winning. Real victory doesn't leave you waking up screaming 20 cycles later." Vex's rocky features shifted into confusion. But the humans surrendered. They signed the peace treaty. "We brought them into the Coalition as equals." "Equals," Vextar repeated slowly, as if tasting something bitter. "That's one way to put it." He looked around the cantina, noting how conversations seemed too quiet when people realized who was speaking. Even hardened spacers gave him respect, mixed with something else, fear, maybe, or pity. "You want the real story? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." Vextar's cybernetic eye clicked as it focused on each young face. "After tonight, you'll never look at humans the same way.
How?
You might never look at war the same way either." The bartender, a 6-armed Nexori with purple skin, glanced their way nervously. Everyone on the station knew better than to interrupt when Vextar started talking about the war. The old commander had a reputation for breaking furniture when the memories got too vivid. "The humans had no right to win," Vextar began, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet section of the cantina. "Think about it logically. It had maybe 50 ships total, most of them converted mining vessels and cargo haulers. We brought 2,000 of the finest warships in the galaxy. Their weapons were primitive projectile throwers and basic energy weapons. We had plasma cannons that could crack moons." He paused to take another drink, his scarred hands trembling slightly. "Their bodies were so fragile. No natural armor, no redundant organs, no enhanced healing. One good hit, and they'd go down. We called them soft skins behind closed doors and laughed about how easy this would be." Zixra's scales rippled with anticipation. "So what happened? How did they fight back?" Vextar's good eye went distant, seeing something the others couldn't. "We stopped laughing on Kepler Station. That's where I learned the difference between fighting soldiers and fighting humans. See, we expected them to behave like rational beings, calculate the odds, realize they couldn't win, and surrender with honor intact." The old warrior's voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing the recruits to lean closer. But humans don't fight like soldiers. They fight like cornered animals, protecting their young. And when you corner something like that, double quotes, he shook his head slowly. Well, you better be ready for what comes next. Outside the cantina's reinforced windows, the stars wheeled slowly as Nexus Station continued its eternal orbit. But inside, 3 young soldiers sat transfixed, about to learn truths that would change everything they thought they knew about. Courage, sacrifice, and the terrifying beauty of the human spirit. Vexstar's massive frame seemed to shrink as he recalled those dark days. The cantina's background noise faded to nothing as the old commander's voice took on the hollow tone of someone reliving a nightmare. 3,000 Gornok shock troops under my command, he said, staring into his drink. The best warriors the Coalition had to offer, each one worth 10 regular soldiers. We'd crushed rebellions on 40 worlds without breaking a sweat. Kepler Station was supposed to be a warm-up exercise. The cybernetic implants along his skull pulsed with a soft blue light as he accessed memories stored in digital format. Sometimes the organic brain tried to forget what the machine parts never could. The asteroid was nothing special. It's just a rock floating in space with tunnels carved through it. The humans had been mining rare minerals there for maybe 5 years. Intelligence said 300 defenders, mostly civilians with some basic training. We figured we'd be done before lunch and back on the ship playing cards. Korth's tentacles writhed nervously. 3,000 against 300. Those are impossible odds. That's what we thought too. Vexstar nodded grimly.
Hey, my lieutenant.
A young hothead named Krexel even made jokes about it being target practice. We came in fast and hard, expecting to see surrender flags before our boots hit the deck. The old warrior paused, his cybernetic eye projecting faint holographic images that only he could see clearly. The recruits caught glimpses of rocky corridors and sparking machinery. The first sign something was wrong came when we breached the outer airlocks. No screaming, no panic. Just this dead silence that made your scales crawl, and we heard it singing. Human voices echoing through the tunnels, singing some battle song from their homeworld. Zixra's blue scales had gone pale. Singing while under attack? That's when we met their commander, Hornakim, according to the files. Barely came up. To my chest, maybe weighed as much as one of my arms. Auburn hair tied back, wearing a simple mining suit with a sidearm that looked like it belonged in a museum. She was standing right there in the main corridor waiting for us. Vexstar took a long drink, his hands shaking slightly as the memories flooded back. Krexel stepped forward with the surrender demands. Standard procedure, lay down weapons, submit to Coalition authority, and nobody gets hurt. Hana listened to the whole thing without blinking. Then she smiled. The commander's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, not a scared smile or a fake brave one, a real smile like she'd just heard the funniest joke in the galaxy. She looked up at 3,000 armed warriors and said, "We'd rather die than kneel, just like that," calm as ordering dinner. Dex shifted his massive rocky bulk uncomfortably. Bravado, trying to look tough. That's what we thought. Krexel even laughed, called her a foolish soft skin, and said we'd drag her out in chains. That's when the mining equipment started up. Vexstar's cybernetic eye whirred louder, projecting clearer images now. The recruits could see flashes of industrial lasers cutting through metal, sparks flying in the darkness. Turns out a mining laser designed to cut through asteroid rock works pretty well on Gornek armor too. A human named Woojin Park had rigged every piece of equipment in the station. Conveyor belts became troop traps, or crushers turned into improvised weapons. Even the life support system was weaponized. They could vent atmosphere from any section at will. The cantina had gone completely quiet now. Even the bartender had stopped cleaning glasses to listen. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was their eyes. Every human we encountered had this look, not hatred or fear, but acceptance. Like they'd already made peace with dying and were just waiting to take as many of us with them as possible. Vexstar stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. He began pacing, his forearms gesticulating as the memories overwhelmed him. We fought for 18 hours straight. 18 hours. My shock troops were getting picked off one by miners with improvised weapons. Woojin had turned their reactor into a bomb that could crack the asteroid in half. Every time we thought we had them cornered, they'd spring another trap. The projection from his eye showed a final corridor, emergency lighting casting everything in hellish red shadows. And we finally breached their command center. We found 50 humans. Men, women, some barely old enough to hold weapons. They were standing in perfect formation, backs straight, eyes forward. No begging, no crying, just waiting. Zixra's voice came out as a squeak. What did they do? Hanan stepped forward. She was holding a detonator, the trigger for Wujin's reactor bomb. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Your choice, Commander. Take this station and die with us, or leave and live. Either way, we don't kneel." Vexstar sat back down heavily, the chair groaning under his weight. I looked at those 50 humans, ready to die rather than surrender. I looked at my remaining troops, good soldiers who'd followed me across the galaxy, and I realized something that changed everything. He met each recruit's gaze in turn. Weren't the heroes in this story? We were the monsters. The silence stretched on for long moments before Vex found his voice. "You retreated?" "We left," Vexstar confirmed quietly. "Packed up our wounded and our dead and flew away."
Oh.
Left the humans standing there in their tunnels, still singing their battle songs.
Oh.
Command called it a tactical withdrawal. But we all knew the truth. He raised his glass in a bitter toast. 3,000 elite warriors defeated by 300 miners who refused to kneel. Vexstar's voice turned cold as winter space. The 3 recruits could see his mandibles clicking together, a nervous habit that betrayed just how deeply these memories still cut him. His cybernetic eye dimmed for a moment, as if even the machine part of him didn't want to relive what came next. After Kepler Station, Command lost their minds. High Admiral Zorix himself called me a coward. Ode said I'd been embarrassed by primitive softskins and brought shame to the entire coalition fleet. Vexstar's scarred face twisted with old anger. They stripped me of my ground command and stuck me on a destroyer, said I could redeem myself in the space battle. The cantina's holographic displays flickered, showing star charts and ship movements from decades past. Other patrons had given up, pretending not to listen. Even the grizzled veterans at the bar had turned their chairs to face the old commander. 2,000 ships, Vexstar continued, his voice barely controlled. The largest armada ever assembled. Dreadnoughts that could level continents, carriers packed with fighter squadrons, destroyers like mine armed with enough firepower to crack moons. We blotted out the stars when we dropped out of hyperspace. Korth leaned forward, his tentacles wrapped tight around his chair and the humans. 47 ships. Vexstar laughed bitterly. 47 pieces of floating junk. Mining barges with plasma cutters welded to their hulls. Cargo haulers with missile pods strapped to their sides. Tourist liners converted into torpedo boats. Most of them were held together with prayer and scrap metal. The cybernetic displays. In his eye activated again, projecting ghostly images of the human fleet. The recruits could see ships that looked like they'd been built in scrapyards. Mismatched hulls covered in improvised armor plating. Our sensors couldn't believe the readings. Our biggest ship was a deep space freighter called the New Soul. Captain Duhaen Lee commanding. The thing was older than some of our junior officers, held together with patches and determination. Stood and began pacing again, his forearms moving in agitated gestures as he spoke. The battle started exactly as Command planned. We opened up with long-range plasma cannons, expecting to vaporize half their fleet before they could even return fire. But the humans did something nobody expected. He paused, his good eye growing distant. They sang. Its voice was barely a whisper, broadcast on all frequencies. Every human ship started singing at once, some old battle hymn from their homeworld. Thousands of voices in perfect harmony, echoing across the void while plasma fire lit up the darkness around them. The old warriors' pacing grew more frantic as the memories flooded back. They came at us in formation, those junk ships holding perfect alignment while our cannons tore chunks off their hulls. No fear, no panic. Just that singing and the steady pulse of their engines pushing forward into certain death. Vexstar stopped pacing and gripped the back of his chair, his knuckles going white. The new soul took 3 direct hits in the first exchange. Hull breached in 6 places, half the crew dead, engines barely functioning. Any sane captain would have ordered retreat. Instead, Duhai and Lee opened a channel to the entire fleet. Cybernetic projections shifted, showing the interior of a damaged ship. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the recruits could see human figures moving through smoke and sparks. "I can still hear his voice," Vexstar whispered. "Calm as a lake, no fear at all," said "This is Captain Lee to all. Ships. We're going to ram the flagship. Tell your families you are brave." Then he cut the channel and pointed that dying ship straight at Admiral Zorex's command vessel. Vex's rocky features had gone pale. Did he make it? Full burn with? Damaged engines. The new soul lit up like a comet, trailing fire and debris. Our point defense systems opened up, trying to stop him, but he kept coming. At the last second, he reopened the channel. Vexstar's voice cracked, and he had to stop for a moment to compose himself. He wasn't talking to us. He was talking to his family. Said he loved his mate, the Jinn, more than all the stars in the sky. Talked about how he'd never see his daughter's first steps, never teach his son to pilot a ship. But he said humans dream of touching the stars, of peace and exploration and wonder. And they'd paint the void with their blood before they'd let anyone take that dream away. The cantina had gone dead silent. Even the bartender's 6 arms had stopped moving. The new soul hit the flagship's port side, going near light speed. The explosion lit up half the system, took out 2 escort destroyers, and crippled the Admiral's ship. But that wasn't the worst part. Vexstar's cybernetic eye was projecting rapidly now, showing ship after ship in the human fleet. Every human vessel that died that day did the same thing. Opened channels as they went down, talking to their families, their children, their lovers. A cargo hauler captain named Jin Wu spent his last moments reading a bedtime story to his 3-year-old daughter. A mining barge pilot called Sujin sang a lullaby her mother used to sing. They made us know them, made us see their faces, hear their dreams. The old commander slumped back into his chair, looking older than his years. We weren't fighting an enemy fleet. We were murdering fathers and mothers, dreamers and poets who happened to be flying ships. Every human who died that day left a hole in the universe, and they made sure we felt every single one. He looked up at the 3 young recruits, his expression haunted. We won the battle. Destroyed 38 of their ships, captured the rest. But as we counted our dead and tried to repair our damaged vessels, we realized something terrible. We'd become exactly the kind of monsters that parents tell their children about in scary stories. And the humans. They'd become heroes. Vexstar's voice dropped to barely a whisper, forcing everyone in the cantina to lean closer. I had gone dark, as if even the machine couldn't bear to process what came next. The 3 recruits noticed his 4 massive hands were shaking as he reached for his drink. "Earth's moon," he began, the words coming out like broken glass. "Luna, Base 7. Our intelligence said it was humanity's secret weapons facility, the place where they built their most dangerous war machines." He laughed bitterly. "Command. Wanted it taken intact? Wanted to study human weapons technology? Maybe turn it against them?" The holographic star charts flickering around the cantina seemed to dim as Vexstar's memories took hold. Other patrons had abandoned their own conversations, entirely drawn into the old warrior's tale like moths to a flame. I was leading a strike team, 50 of our best soldiers, full combat armor, enough firepower to level a city block. We dropped from orbit in stealth pods, landed on the dark side of the moon where their sensors couldn't track us icily. Tentacles had gone rigid with tension. "How many defenders?" "That's just it," Vexstar said, his scarred face twisting with pain. "No defenders, no weapons, no soldiers at all. Just a simple research complex built into a crater, with big windows looking out at Earth, hanging in the black sky like a blue jewel." The cybernetic projections from his eye began showing images of sterile white corridors, laboratories filled with computers and workbenches, normal everyday scenes that somehow felt more ominous than any battlefield. We breached the airlock, expecting to find weapon prototypes, maybe chemical labs or bomb-making equipment. Instead, His voice caught in his throat.
Ace.
Instead, we found a daycare center. Children's drawings on the walls. In circles, toys scattered across the floor. Zixra's blue scales had gone completely pale. Children, the facility was a research station, all right. But they weren't making weapons. They were studying child development, creating better educational tools, designing toys that would help human younglings learn and grow. Vexstar stood abruptly, beginning his nervous pacing again. 23 scientists, 12 support staff, and 15 children whose parents worked at the base. The silence in the cantina was absolute now. Even the ventilation systems seemed to have gone quiet. Dr. Subin Park was in Laboratory 3 when we found her. A small woman with kind eyes, wearing a lab coat covered in paint stains. She was sitting at a workbench, carefully painting the face on a small doll. Just a simple toy, the kind human parents give their younglings to help them sleep. Vexstar's cybernetic eye projected the image clearly now, a gentle-faced woman with graying hair, looking up from her work with no fear, only infinite sadness. She looked at our weapons, our armor, our alien faces behind combat masks, and you know what she said? Could have been welcome here, just like that. No anger, no accusations. She gestured to another workbench where she'd been designing toys for different alien species. Cathari puzzle games, Blixian sensory toys even. Little Gornok figures for their younglings to play with. Vex made a sound like grinding stone. She was making toys for our children. All of them were. The entire facility was dedicated to cross-species understanding through play. They were studying how different alien younglings learned, how they grew, what made them happy. They wanted to build bridges between our peoples, one toy at a time. Vexstar stopped pacing and gripped the edge of a nearby table, his knuckles white with strain. That's when Dr. Taeho Kim hit the alarm. Not a combat alert, a broadcast beacon. He'd activated every communication array on the base, every satellite. In lunar orbit, our entire assault was being transmitted live across the galaxy. The cybernetic projections shifted, showing communication arrays extending like metal flowers from the lunar surface, all pointing toward the stars. Every civilized world could see us, armed soldiers surrounding scientists and children, our glorious military operation exposed for what it really was, a massacre waiting to happen. The Coalition Council was watching. The Neutral Worlds Assembly was watching. Even our own families back home were watching. Vexstar's voice grew even quieter, forcing the recruits to strain their ears. But the worst moment came when we gathered all the humans in the main laboratory. 38 civilians, 15 children, all lined up against the wall. Command was screaming through our comm units, demanding we complete the mission, eliminate all witnesses. His cybernetic eye projected the scene. Humans of all ages standing together, the adults with their arms around the children. Faces calm but eyes filled with infinite sadness. That's when little Jiho stepped forward. He'd be 10 years old, wearing a bright red sweater his grandmother had knitted. He had these big, curious eyes, the kind that see everything. He walked right up to me, looked up through my combat mask, and asked the question that broke everything. The 3 recruits were holding their breath. "Why are you sad, mister?" That's what he said. This tiny human child, facing armed soldiers who were about to kill him, and he was worried about our feelings. Vexstar's voice cracked completely now, and the recruits could see moisture leaking from his organic eye. I didn't understand at first, then I felt it warm liquid running down my cheeks inside my helmet. Tears. I was crying. All of us were crying. 50 hardened warriors, sobbing like younglings, while we pointed weapons at people who'd spent their lives trying to make the galaxy a better place for our children. The old commander collapsed back into his chair, looking broken. That little boy reached up and touched my armor with his tiny hand. "It's okay," he said. "We forgive you." Can you imagine? Standing there about to die, and he was comforting us, telling us it was okay. The cantina remained frozen in horrified silence as Vexstar buried his scarred face in his 4 hands. The weight of 20 cycles finally crushing down on him like the gravity of a collapsed star. Vexstar's cybernetic implants sparked and flickered as he slowly pushed himself up from the worn metal chair. 20 cycles of guilt and nightmares had taken their toll on his massive frame. The three recruits watched in stunned silence as tears continued streaming down the old warrior's scarred face, mixing with the coolant fluid leaking from his damaged cybernetics. "You want to know how the war really ended?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. "It's not with explosions or surrender ceremonies. It ended with a single transmission from Luna Base 7. The holographic displays around the cantina shimmered as Vexstar's cybernetic eye accessed the deepest, most painful memories stored in its databanks. The recruits could see fragments of that final day, Coalition ships holding position around Earth's moon, thousands of soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. High Command was screaming through our comm units, "Complete the mission. Eliminate all witnesses." But we couldn't move. 50 of the Coalition's deadliest warriors, paralyzed by a 10-year-old boy who'd forgiven us for trying to murder him. Vexstar walked slowly around the table, his forearms hanging limp at his sides like broken wings. Then Dr. Suben did something that changed everything. She picked up one of her handmade dolls, a little Gornak figure she'd been crafting for younglings on my homeworld. She held it out to me and said, "This was supposed to be a gift. For children like you once were." The cybernetic projections showed the moment clearly. A gentle human woman, extending a simple toy toward a towering alien warrior in full combat armor. The contrast was so stark, it made several cantina patrons look away. I took that doll with trembling hands. It was perfect down to the smallest detail. She'd even gotten the scale patterns right, the way our youngling's skin changes color when they're happy. This human scientist, who'd never set foot on our world, spent months learning about our biology just to make toys that would bring joy to our children. Korth's tentacles had gone completely still. What happened next? Admiral Zorix himself came on the come, furious beyond words, demanded to know why we weren't following orders. So I activated my helmet camera and showed him what we were seeing. 38 civilians, 15 children, all of them looking at us with forgiveness instead of fear. Vexstar's cybernetic eye projected the Admiral's response, a scaled reptilian face twisted with rage, then slowly shifting to confusion, then horror as the reality of the situation sank in. The transmission was still broadcasting across the galaxy. Every world, every species, every government was watching us threaten people whose only crime was caring about children. Zorix tried to order us to cut the feed, but it was too late. The damage was done. The old commander stopped at a viewport, staring out at the swirling nebula beyond Nexus Station. The colors reminded him of the aurora he'd seen dancing over human cities during his years of service in their space. Little Jiho walked up to each of my soldiers. One by one, that brave little boy looked up at warriors who could have crushed him with one hand, and he asked if we were okay, if we needed help, if there was anything he could do to make us feel better. Zixra made a sound like a sob. How could he be so kind? Because that's what humans do, Vixter said simply. They see pain, and they try to heal it. They see fear, and they offer comfort. Even when facing death, their first instinct is to reach out and help someone else. The cybernetic memory shifted to show coalition ships all across the system, weapons powering down, fighters returning to their carriers, the massive war machine grinding to a halt as thousands of soldiers grappled with what they'd witnessed. Zorax called off the attack, not because he'd grown a conscience, but because he realized the political cost. Every world in the galaxy had just watched the mighty coalition military threaten children and toy makers. Our reputation as honorable warriors was destroyed in a single moment. Vexstar turned back to face the recruits, his expression haunted, but somehow lighter, as if sharing the story had lifted some ancient burden from his shoulders. The peace treaty was signed 3 days later. It's not a surrender, a mutual recognition that we'd been fighting the wrong war against the wrong enemy. The Coalition Council formally apologized to humanity and invited them to join as full partners, not conquered subjects. Vex's rocky features showed deep confusion. But why? We still had the superior fleet, the larger army. We could have continued. The war. Could we? Vexter asked quietly. After Lunabase 7, recruitment to coalition forces dropped by 70%. Entire worlds threatened to secede rather than participate in what they called the Children's War. Our own families were ashamed of us. The old warrior gathered his worn military coat from the back of his chair, the fabric heavy with metals. From campaigns across the galaxy? But the most prominent decoration wasn't a medal at all. It was a small, carefully preserved Gornok doll, hanging from a chain around his neck. I spent the next 15 years stationed in human space. Their languages, eating at their tables, playing with their younglings. Du Haiyan Li's widow, the Jin, became like a sister to me. When she had her second child, she named him Vex after me. The warrior who'd tried to kill her husband, his mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter, though tears were still streaming down his face. That human child calls me Uncle Vex. He draws me pictures and sends them across the galaxy. His latest one shows humans and aliens holding hands under the stars, with a caption that says "Friends Forever." It's hanging in my quarters right now. Vexstar moved toward the cantina exit, but paused at the threshold. The recruits could see. Other patrons throughout the establishment, hardened spacers, veteran soldiers, traitors who'd seen the worst the galaxy had to offer, all of them sitting in contemplative silence. The Coalition learned something that day that rewrote our understanding of warfare itself, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed cantina. If you want to truly conquer a species like humanity, you have to be willing to destroy everything that makes victory worth having. You have to become a monster so terrible that even winning means you've lost your soul. He looked back one final time at the three young recruits, his cybernetic eye blazing with conviction. And if you become that kind of monster, then you've already lost the only battle that really matters. The fight to remain worthy of the peace you claim to be fighting for. The cantina door slid shut behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the recruits alone with their thoughts and the weight of truths that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Outside the viewport, human and alien ships traveled side by side through the star-filled darkness, their running lights blinking in perfect harmony as they carried cargo, passengers, and dreams to distant worlds. In the years that followed, whenever young soldiers asked about the human war, they would hear different versions of the story, but they would all end the same way, with the understanding that the greatest victories are sometimes won not through conquest, but through the courage to choose compassion over cruelty, even when the choice costs everything. The end.